Hey, lunch table, welcome back to another video. A lot of us grow up thinking retirement is something that happens way later in life, after you've worked 40 plus years, saved millions of dollars, and finally get to relax. But what if I told you might not need nearly as much as you think? You might be way closer to a version of retirement than you realize. It may not necessarily be yachts and fancy cars, fancy houses, fancy vacations, but the ultimate freedom, peace, and control over your time, how you spend your day to day. That's what we're going to be talking about today. So stay tuned. Part one, I feel the myth we're sold. Let's be real. The way retirement is sold to us, it's all about luxury, beach homes, golfing every day, and never having to work again. And to get there, you need millions of dollars, right? You need money. So we really internalize that pressure. If I don't hit that number, I failed. I feel like a failure. And that mindset can lead to burnout, constantly chasing more money. And, even when you're ultimately doing fine in life, like you're on the right track. But, here's the truth. That vision of retirement, it's one version of retirement, not the version. So keep that in mind. Part two, redefining retirement. What if retirement didn't mean never working again, but just meant not having to work out of desperation or need for that monthly paycheck? For a lot of people, retirement just means not being stuck in that 9 to 5 job they hate or, don't want to do for 40 plus years, having a paid off home in a lower cost area, working part-time or doing freelance work, or, just spending time on passion projects that still bring in a little income. It's not about checking out of life completely when it comes to retirement. It's about checking into your life on your terms, being able to do what you want to do, on a day-to-day basis. Part three, what helped me think differently? I think I used to think I'll never be able to retire. I don't have the kind of money they say you need. But then I really stopped and asked myself, who says, and what does retirement actually look like for me? Because, I can walk down the street and I can ask someone what retirement looks like for them, and it could be completely different than me. And, that's okay. At the end of the day, everybody has that goal number they want to reach. So, I ultimately just really thought about it. For me, rich doesn't mean luxury cars or mansions. I don't really care about having fancy cars. I'm not really here to entertain or show off to people I stop next to at the stoplight. And, mansions or big houses, I don't see that because, the bigger the house, the harder it is to clean, the harder it is to maintain, the more expensive the cost or repairs are when it comes to it. So, I'm not really big into the big luxurious items in when it comes to life. So, it ultimately means like the pretty much what rich means to me. It means time to myself, a fridge that's full, the ability to help out family if needed, and no boss breathing down my neck, honestly. And, when I really looked at it, when I broke it down and defined it that way, things didn't feel so far off anymore. I realized I didn't have to wait until 65 to start, quote unquote, living better. I just really needed to define what enough means to me and what enough is for me. So part four, practical thoughts. Here's what I'm starting to implement, and here's what you can try in your personal life. Track your actual expenses. You might not need as much as you assume. Try to really look at not your needs, but your wants. Like, obviously, you need a roof over your head. You need to be fed. You need to be clothed. You need to pay car insurance, or you need to be able to pay for gas to fill up said car to get to the job. Really focus on, like I said, your needs, not so much your wants. Think about where you could live life or what lifestyle changes you'd actually enjoy. If you're in an expensive place, right now I'm based out of Florida, so definitely not the cheapest state to live in, not the cheapest real estate market down here right now. So, who knows, maybe in a couple years, when it's time to buy a house of my own, it's possible I go move to a state that typically has like a cheaper real estate market and or will satisfy my lifestyle needs. I've always wanted to live in an area that gets snow where I can possibly try snowboarding or skiing or hockey or whatever the case may be. So just ultimately decide where you could live and if it matches your lifestyle or the lifestyle you plan on pursuing in the next couple of years. And then ask yourself, if I only needed to earn enough to cover the basics, kind of like those needs that we talked about earlier, could you do that now? Could you do it soon? Like, how far are you off? How much do you need? What's that number look like? So, just really keep that in mind and like write it down. I'd say the best way to really visualize it for me personally, write those numbers down, write my goal numbers, write what I currently have, and, try to brainstorm ways you can reach that goal number of yours, whether it's getting a higher paying job, getting a side job, working on a business, really whatever the case best suits your needs or your area that you're in right now. And really sometimes freedom isn't all about money. While it's nice, it's ultimately determining if you can survive off less money. So really closing this video out, So retiring on less, I feel it's not just possible, it might be easier than chasing someone else's version of success or the mainstream success we're all fed where, oh yeah, you need to be able to retire, you need to be able to buy a yacht, you need a huge mansion, you need to be able to take care of your kids, your family. It really ultimately falls on what you define as success, what you define as enough. If you can live off $30,000, $40,000 a year, at $1 million, if you had $1 million net worth, or sorry, I'll just say like liquid, I think like 4% of that, is really not much. If you end up taking 4% out a year, with the compounding and the average interest rate of return on those investments, you'll be able to live a comfortable life if you can survive off $30,000-$40,000 a year. Not living extravagant, like I said, you're not going to get the yachts, the mansion, but if you're able to decide, hey, I don't really want to work in the next couple of years, or I want to take a part-time job, or I want to work more on my my passion projects or my side projects, or maybe do some contracting on the side, whatever the case may be, you really don't need millions of dollars. You really don't need to wait forever to achieve that goal. So like I said, you really just need to sit yourself down and decide what you want out of life, what you want to achieve to reach that quote unquote retirement goal. And ultimately, you really just need clarity, consistency, and a little creativity. Like I said, where you ultimately see yourself. So closing this video out, if this made you rethink what retirement could actually look like, in your personal experience or your personal journey throughout this life, feel free to drop a comment and let me know, what's your version of freedom? What monetary value do you need to achieve to tell yourself, what? I'm good. I've officially reached that number to achieve my version of freedom. What is that version? I'm always curious to hear people's thoughts and goals. As we all go through this life together. Do you see yourself working less when you achieve that freedom? Do you see yourself traveling more, starting something new, whether it's a business or a side project? If it can earn you some income, I'd love to hear it. And, ultimately, if this gave you something to think about, please leave a like, feel free to subscribe, and stick around. As always, more real conversations like this coming soon. All right, Lunch Table, I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.